With Nicklas Backstrom out indefinitely, the Washington Capitals knew they needed to bring in a center this offseason, and they were able to sign Dylan Strome to a relatively low-risk 1-year, $3.5 million contract. This deal makes a lot of sense for both sides. For the Capitals, they needed a center and one that didn't cost a whole lot of money. And for Dylan Strome, this is a huge opportunity to get his career headed back on the right track. Let's take a look at the fit and what Dylan Strome can bring to the Washington Capitals. Hey everybody, so one of the more recent bigger free agent signings was Dylan Strome going to the Washington Capitals on a 1-year contract, $3.5 million. We knew that Washington was going to be in the market for a center because of the Nicklas Backstrom news that he is continuing to have hip problems. He's out indefinitely. There's no timetable for his return, and there's honestly a good possibility he may not play at all next season. So they needed to bring somebody in down the middle. Lars Eller is not a number 2 center, and Connor McMichael really hasn't shown that he's ready to make that jump to be a top 6 player yet. They've got some younger guys like McMichael, like Hendrix Lapierre, but those would be asking a lot for a player that probably isn't ready for that kind of role yet. I personally thought Washington might be in on the Nazem Kadri sweepstakes because he could be a huge piece down the middle there. But they ended up going with a much lower risk, much cheaper option in Dylan Strome, coming off a pretty decent season with the Chicago Blackhawks. And this is the kind of opportunity that Dylan Strome really needed to get his career back on track. And I hope that he is able to take full advantage of it because Strome has had a very inconsistent NHL career. He was a top 5 pick, and he hasn't really lived up to those expectations yet to this point. And this is a big chance for Strome at 25 years old to really kind of get himself headed in the right direction, solidify himself as a second-line level player, and hopefully get himself a bigger and nicer contract after this coming season, whether that's with Washington or whether he's able to move on and go somewhere else. But let's take a look at Dylan Strome here, and I'll talk about what a huge opportunity this is and why he needed an opportunity like this. Because he's 25 years old. He was the 3rd overall pick in the 2015 draft by the Arizona Coyotes. And he just really hasn't lived up to that. He hasn't been consistently playing at a level that you'd hope a top 5 draft pick would be playing at. And, you know, if you look at what he's done in his career, he got off to a very slow start with Arizona. You know, he couldn't really solidify himself in that lineup. He never played more than 21 games in a season with the Coyotes. His point totals were fairly low. 2017, 2018, he only had 9 points in 21 games. 2018, 2019, first 20 games, he only had 6 points. Then he gets traded to the Chicago Blackhawks for Nick Schmaltz, and that was a pretty big deal when it happened. And he actually finished that year extremely well with Chicago in 2018-2019. He played 58 games with the Blackhawks that year, scored 17 goals, 51 points in those 58 games. And this was kind of supposed to be a breakout moment for Dylan Strome in his career. And, you know, when it was going on, there was a lot of talk about how this trade kind of, you know, just like set him on the right path. And he was, you know, kind of expected to become a star with the Blackhawks. Unfortunately, though, that didn't really carry over or happen beyond that first season in Chicago, because the next year, 2019-2020, he played the same number of games, 58, but instead of 51 points, he only had 38. It was a pretty significant drop-off there in point production from Strome. And then we saw, like, okay, maybe it's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows for Dylan Strome here in Chicago. Then the next season, he really struggled. This was the 2021 season that was shortened to 56 games. He played 40 of those 56 games with the Blackhawks, only had 9 goals and 17 points, and was an abysmal -16. And This is where the trade rumors really started with Strome. There was a lot of talk about Chicago maybe trying to move him. You know, after that 51 points in 58 games when he started with the Blackhawks, it was a step back in 2020 and another big step back in 2021. Things were headed in the wrong direction. There was a lot of talk about Chicago trading him. And, you know, things were once again headed downhill for Dylan Strome. You know, he didn't get off to a good start. Then he had a really good run after the trade to Chicago. And then things went back downhill. And we're starting to really see the inconsistencies with Dylan Strome. He ends up not being traded. He plays last season with Chicago. There were trade rumors pretty much all year long about Chicago moving Strome. They never did. He played 69 games last season. Actually had a pretty solid year. It was definitely a bounce back year from the 17 points in 40 games in 2021. He scored 22 goals. It was his first 20-goal season in the NHL. He had 48 points, -6 on a Blackhawks team that, you know, really struggled last season, so not surprising there. But he bounced back to a 48-point guy in 69 games and looks like he can once again be a 50-point player and a top 6 center in the NHL. And honestly, I enjoyed watching Strome last year. I think his game showed some significant rebound, some great signs of getting back on track last season. And then this offseason, Chicago decides not to even qualify Dylan Strome, which I was a little taken aback by because I thought they would at least be able to trade Strome. Like, he should at least have some trade value at 25 years old and coming off a 48-point season. You'd think they'd be able to get something. Maybe not, you know, a first-round pick. Certainly not a first-round pick. Maybe not a high-end prospect or anything like that. But you'd think they'd at least be able to get like a mid-round pick for Dylan Strome. Instead, they just don't qualify him. They lose him for nothing. He becomes a free agent. And all of a sudden now you have a 25-year-old player who was a 3rd overall pick in the draft back in 2015, coming off a bounce-back season where he almost had 50 points available on the free agent market. Makes a ton of sense for the Washington Capitals to go for a move like this because Washington, with the situation that they're in, needed a center. So right away, you're looking at the centers that are available, and there were quite a few of them in free agency this offseason, and you're wondering about what is the best option for the Washington Capitals. They could have gone out and tried to nail a big gun like a Vincent Trocheck or a Nazem Kadri, or even maybe a Claude Giroux, someone like that. That would have required them likely moving salary and making a trade to set that up, but nonetheless, they could have gone for a big play like that. But instead, they decide to do something that I think is lower risk, less expensive, and honestly has a lot of upside potential in my opinion, and that is Dylan Strome on a 1-year deal. So they bring in Strome 1 year, $3.5 million, relatively low cost, and obviously very short term, very low risk. And you have a guy now who's getting a fresh start, coming off a bounce-back season, who really wants to set his career on track. This is a huge, huge opportunity for Strome. He should be a very motivated player. He's going to get to play with some good wingers in Washington playing in that top 6. As you know, whether it's Oshie, Mantha, I think they'll play Ovechkin, obviously, with Kuznetsov most likely. But he can play with Oshie, he could play with Mantha, he could play with Connor Brown, he could play with Connor Sherry. Like, there's going to be some good players there for Strome to play with, guys that he can pass the puck to that can score goals. And I think this is a huge opportunity for him to really solidify himself as a second-line guy, have a 50-plus point season, show what he can do. He should be extremely motivated to do that on a 1-year deal where he's going to want to cash in next offseason, or if he re-signs during the year with the Capitals, depending on how he plays. There's a lot of opportunity here for Dylan Strome to really kind of have a breakout season and play a huge role on a Capitals team that, if he does play well, has a chance to be an impact player that could get them back to the playoffs. You know, what if Washington makes the playoffs or not this coming season? I think is going to rely a lot on Darcy Kuemper in goal and their center play without Nicholas Backstrom. Dylan Strome being a huge piece of that center core now with Backstrom out. So, he has a chance to be an impact player for the organization. He has a chance to have an impact on his own career in a major way as far as what his next contract is going to look like, and how he's looked at around the NHL. And really a match made in heaven, I think, given the team situation and Dylan Strome's situation and what they're both trying to accomplish here with this contract. And I have really high hopes for what Dylan Strome can do with the Capitals this season, and I really like it for the Capitals because it's such a low risk play. It's low money at $3.5 million. It's not like they paid $5.5-6 million for somebody. It's a low cost play, and if it doesn't work out, he's just gone at the end of the year. It's a 1-year deal. They can shed the contract at the end of the season if it doesn't work, and he's back on the free agent market. And if it does work out, you may have found a kind of a diamond in the rough here that 2 other teams have already given up on, with being Arizona and Chicago having given up on Strome. All in all, I just think this is a massive opportunity for Dylan Strome to prove that he's worth it as a middle six center and somebody that team should be looking at a longer-term contract to. And for the Capitals, they fill a hole in their roster that they needed to fill on a very low-risk, cheap contract that makes a ton of sense for both sides. And I think this is one of the best deals of free agency as far as a fit for both parties, the team and the player. And one that I really want to see Dylan Strome take advantage of and have a good season and prove that, he's on the right track, that last year's bounce back season wasn't just a fluke, and that he can continue to be a productive 50-plus point player in the NHL. But that's what I've got on Dylan Strome having a massive opportunity with the Washington Capitals and filling a huge team need for them with Nicklas Backstrom out. Thank you guys for watching, and hope you enjoyed the video. And with that, please don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our merchandise store, membership, and donations down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you all soon.